What's up, everybody? It's your boy Eddie, aka Durio 1000. Hopefully, you're having a great day. Today is February the 4th, 2024. Here in Orlando, watching the Pro Bowl here in Orlando. So, right now, I want to take a moment out to talk about voting and Donald Trump and Joe Biden and who really runs this country. Okay, I hope this video doesn't go over 20 minutes, but it just might. So, just a little backstory about me. I was raised my parents were not overly political. My family, however, tended to be lean Democrats, and I won't get into all that. But basically, as I grew older, I started to wonder why, what differentiated the parties. You're taught that the Democrats are for the poor and the Republicans are for the rich, in simple terms. And I never really wanted to, I don't think anybody wants to be poor. So there's that. Like, why, you Democrats for the poor, okay. Republicans are for the rich, okay. So, I started leaning towards, seeing the different types of laws and principles each party had. And when I first voted, I voted. I think I voted Democrat. I think I voted Democrat, but I did vote for Obama. In in 2016, 2015. Prior to that, I was, I guess you could say, a Democrat. And I think at that time I was either working for the New York Times or reading the New York Times or something like that. And it was during when Hillary Clinton. I think I was reading the New York Times, not working. I worked for the New York Times a long time ago. But I was reading the paper and it was like pro Hillary Clinton. And I'm like, wow, isn't a paper supposed to be unbiased? So this brought me to start questioning things that seemed a little odd. So eventually I was like, who's this Trump guy? And people were like, oh, Trump is, Trump is, bad. He's a racist. This was back in 2016 when he was running, and I knew of Trump, but I never really paid him. He didn't really exist in my world. I never watched any of his shows. Like I said, I knew of him. I knew that word that was that he was a billionaire, and rappers would refer to him in his songs and in their songs and things like that. But besides that, he was never in my consciousness. I never kept up with them. Never, I might see him on a show or something, think, oh, cool, rich guy on a show, whatever. It didn't really make a impact on my life. I wasn't enthralled or engulfed by Trump before 2016. So I started wondering why there's so much hate towards Trump. Then I started realizing that, wow, Trump has a history with a lot of blacks. Like I said, prior to 2016, Trump was, I got Donald Trump money. That's what rappers would say prior to 2016. And then, when he started running for president, that's when people started turning, and turning on him, and again, I was still just trying to understand what was going on at this time. So I'm like, wow, Trump was friends with, well, he had a hotel, Trump Towers. Again, I knew of him, but I didn't know him personally. I never knew him. I still don't know him personally. But it's starting to come like, hey, he has hotels all around the United States, all around the world. I'm like, oh, so this is how he got his money. Oh, this is what he does, and things like that. So he started to come more into my conscience, into my awareness, right? In 2016. Then I'm like, what does he stand for? And he started saying that he wanted to, make America great again and all this other stuff. I'm like, wow, this guy really knows what he wants to do, and he has a good plan. And I was like, hey, sounds good. And he said he wanted to, clean up all of the what was he calling it? Clean up get all the older people out and get some new people in. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. So 2016, I voted for Trump, and then I started gaining even more knowledge about what was going on, and I always felt that the president didn't run the country per se, and I was like, something's not right. From 2016 to 2020, not much changed, at least in my reality. Not much changed, right? From 2016 to 2020, besides, Trump getting attacked every which way. He's getting attacked about his skin color, about his hair, about ice cream, about all sorts of stuff. It's like, dang, somebody in the media doesn't like Trump. So I voted for him again in 2020, and I started to understand, realize how fucked up the voting is, how fucked up for the amount of, or the belief of the responsibility or power that we think the president has. Okay, so I started going back and looking at the laws of the United States, and I always knew that there was an underlining, if you call it the Illuminati, the deep state, the people in the shadows who rule this country. And I came full circle. That is the reason why not much changes from president to president. Yeah, some things change. Just like you might get a, what do they call it? What do you call it? Some small incentives for, just like Bush had the, what did he have, the tax rebate or something like that. He gave everybody like $300 or something like that. And then Obama had something. He had the Obama phone, the Obamacare. And then Trump had, what did Trump have? The wall. And I think taxes he had the bring the jobs from China back to the United States, and that was all. I mean, that was fairly good, but also in the grand scheme of things, there wasn't much change, right? So I realized that all of these presidents are nothing more than spokesmen for the Illuminati, the deep state, the Federal Reserve, aka the 8 families of the Federal Reserve. That is who rules this country. And before I get into that, the representatives, the presidents, Bush, Biden, Trump, they really don't have that much power. They have a lot of perceived power, but they don't really have that much power. The true power holders, there are only 2 true power holders in the United States. One is the Federal Reserve, the 8 families of the Federal Reserve. To be more specific, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which basically enslaved every American and gave up all of our power to the bankers, which our forefathers, our founding fathers, wanted to prevent this from happening. And so the 2 powers are the 8 families of the Federal Reserve and the power of the people. Now, we can only be enslaved if we agree to that. If we all stand up and abolish the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, then we will be free. We will see a beautiful America then. But until that point, we will be enslaved by the 8 families of the Federal Reserve. Now, let's take a look at the United States laws so you all won't think I'm blowing hot air. And I'll include a link in the description. So go to uscode.house.gov and browse, and you'll see the Federal Reserve System. Okay. Now, the Federal Reserve Act was established in 1913. Okay. The Act of December 23rd, 1913. All right. And once you click down here, the Federal Reserve Act, it'll pull up a window. And once you pull up this window, you can click on this act here. And it'll give you a snippet of the act. All right, and it gives all of the rules and the power of the 8 families of the Federal Reserve. All right. Now, the Federal Reserve people ask, where does money come from? People think that it comes from the United States, but it actually comes from the 8 families of the Federal Reserve, and the Secretary of the Treasury basically works for the Federal Reserve by printing money or Federal Reserve notes for the Federal Reserve banks. Okay, so that is how money is created, and that is how the Federal Reserve rules our country, because of this act, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, December 22nd, 1913. Now, this is just chapter 5, okay, but there are other chapters that are not listed here, okay? But this goes into the details of how the Federal Reserve works and the laws that it has. Now, one of the things that you will notice while you go through the Federal Reserve Act and laws is that there is no limit as to how much money they can print. There's no limit on who the banks or the 8 families of the Federal Reserve can send money to or use money for. All right. So there's that. And the Federal Reserve, let me show you all a building. Here it is from a helicopter view. Here it is up close. Let me make sure. Here it is up close. And this was completed in 1937. Now, one of the things about the Federal Reserve building and the Federal Reserve in general, they don't build anything. Okay, they don't build any cars, no boats, no houses, nothing, yet they own everything and control this country through inflation, also known as taxation, also known as theft, also known as stealing the purchasing power of the dollars that you have in your pocket. Now, I said that this video was hopefully going to be under 20 minutes, but this is a picture of the Federal Reserve Building in Washington, D.C. Let me show you a picture of the White House. So this is the White House. All right. Federal Reserve Building, White House. Federal Reserve Building, White House. Okay. This is the building where we think the decisions are made, but the decisions aren't made here. The decisions are made here. This is who rules this country. Because the people that work here work for notes, Federal Reserve notes or US dollars from here. So this place controls the currency of the United States, while this place pretends to control the country of the United States. But this place does not control the country of the United States because DC, they work for US dollars, which are controlled by the Federal Reserve, aka the 8 families of the Federal Reserve. Okay? This is who rules this country. This is who we are enslaved to. This is who we did not vote for, yet Congress voted for them. Democrats voted for them in 1913. And this who are the slave masters, are your slave masters and are my slave masters. Because we work and die and kill for the Federal Reserve notes, which are controlled by the 8 families of the Federal Reserve. Not by the White House. Okay? Now, let's talk about the notes. The US dollar. This is proof that the 8 families of the Federal Reserve are the Illuminati. See, at the top of this says Federal Reserve Note. Okay? Federal Reserve Note. This means that it's a note from the Federal Reserve. Now, before this note this cash was backed by gold, silver. Okay? You would be able to redeem this dollar or $10 or $100 or $500 for a certain amount of gold, but not anymore. Take a look at this, and I'm going to show you the Illuminati. Anybody spot the Illuminati? All-seeing eye? Anybody see it? Anybody see this on the Federal Reserve note? Anybody see it on the Federal Reserve note? There it is. There it is. There it is. The all-seeing eye. The all-seeing Federal Reserve, the eight families of the Federal Reserve, the eight families of the Federal Reserve is the Illuminati. Is the Illuminati. And it's, I told you, back in 1913, that is when we were enslaved to the Illuminati. This is when they controlled our country. Okay? They control this note, the circulating supply of this note. And then they'll say, oh, the Federal Reserve can't tell you what to do with your notes. That's true. Per se. Per se. I can send this note to whoever I want to. Go buy a piece of candy bar. Go pay taxes with it. Go to a show with it, with this note. However, they control the supply of this note. The more that they print, and being that they may be going to, well, it's already digital. They really don't even need to print these notes anymore. Everything's digital, right? You have your bank account, which has digits that represent these notes, right? Federal Reserve doesn't even need to print the notes anymore. But people still want cash, right? They say cash is king. The eight families of the Federal Reserve is king. Okay? So, how do they control the money that's in your pocket? Well, it's simple. They control the money that's in your pocket. They're not stealing it physically. What they are doing when they print more is they are stealing the purchasing power of this dollar through inflation. What does that mean? That means that if, hypothetically, if there were only 100 notes in the United States, and there could be no more notes that would ever be made, at that time, in that scenario, there would be a limit as to what. Well, let me rewind. How should I put this? Let's say that the United States started off with 100 of these notes, okay, in circulating supply, total 100 that can ever be printed by the Federal Reserve. That would mean that the power is limited by the Federal Reserve, right? They've printed 100 of these, and they can go home. Now only only 100 of these notes are circulating throughout the United States. And that means that they're scarce. In this example, they would be scarce. They're in the United States, and there are only 100 of these notes to go around. That would make them, in theory, scarce. But it doesn't end there. What happens is that the Federal Reserve comes in, and they'll print up another 100, and then another 100, and then another 100, and then 1 million, then 10 million. So now your same $1 note that was in your pocket has lost its scarcity. It has lost its purchasing power because there are more of these notes in circulation. It's not as scarce. And the more money, the more notes that the Federal Reserve prints, the less purchasing power your dollar that's in your pocket has. That's in simple terms, okay? It started out with 100 of these notes going around, and then the Federal Reserve stole your purchasing power from you by printing more of these notes into circulation, reducing the purchasing power of your note, reducing the scarcity of your note. That is the power of the Federal Reserve. Most people don't understand this simple logic. They think that, oh, the money's in their hand, so they control it. No. You have the paper, true, but the Federal Reserve controls the purchasing power, the scarcity or the lack of scarcity of the money that's in your pocket. This is why you see places like Venezuela and other places, Argentina, they get inundated with these notes because their central bank printed so much. But the difference in the Federal Reserve notes versus the Argentina notes and the Venezuela notes is that the Federal Reserve notes are global. They're accepted everywhere, right? So what that does is that just means it's prolonging the time for the inflation to hit. But inflation does hit. These dollars have to go somewhere. The value, the purchasing power is being reduced. Even if these notes are being sent over to Brazil, even if these notes are being sent over to Europe, even if these notes are being sent over to Japan, China, wherever, they are eventually going to reduce the purchasing power of the notes that you have. They're going to come home. They're going to end up back here in the United States. And even if they don't end up back in the United States, if you travel outside of the United States with these Federal Reserve notes, your purchasing power is reduced overseas because your note is not scarce, because the Federal Reserve has been printing and stealing your notes, your purchasing power. That's how we are enslaved to the Federal Reserve, and that is how and why we need to abolish the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. I call it the Slavery Act of 1913 because we are enslaved to the 8 families of the Federal Reserve. Period. You can't escape it. You can't escape it. Unless we abolish the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. It's like a house of cards. Everything was built on the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Once we remove the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, once we abolish that, either through the county, the state, or the country, that's when we will get true freedom. That's when we will get competition. The Federal Reserve has not done anything positive for the people of the United States except steal, and tax. They control the interest rate, and they control the power of printing the currency and stealing the purchasing power. Because every time they turn that printer on, they're stealing the purchasing power of the notes that you work for. And people are killing for this note that the 8 families of the Federal Reserve have infinite amount. This is why there's a big divide between the rich and the poor. There's a hell of a gap between the 8 families of the Federal Reserve who have infinite money and the rest of us. We're all poor. We're all poor. Some poorer than others. That's what this middle class bullshit is about. Oh, I'm not as poor as you, or you're poorer than me. Oh, makes you feel good, but you're still fucking poor. We're all poor. We're all poor. If you need this, you're poor. If you can't print this out of thin air like your families of the Federal Reserve, you're poor. You have $1 million, you're poor. $2 million, you're poor. Federal Reserve has infinite notes. They can press a keyboard and put $1 billion of these notes in circulation in a half a second. That's rich. You having to go out and work every day just for them to print more money to steal your wealth, your hard-earned money. That's poor. That's enslavement. You don't have any control. You have no control on how much the Federal Reserve prints. They print however much they want to at their damn will, at their discretion. They steal at their discretion. They steal your purchasing power at their discretion. They're out there living in fucking luxury. Traveling private jets and don't do any work. They just steal your purchasing power. They print money for themselves. And then we have to wait for it to trickle down to us. Who do you think's buying these Rolls Royces? These new goddamn Rolls Royces. Every goddamn year. Who? Who's getting these motherfucking new Rolls Royces for their goddamn wives every goddamn year? Who's flying these private jets from country to country every goddamn day that stay in the top floors of these hotels? That's who the Federal Reserve is. That's who's rich. You don't have a private jet, you're not rich. If you don't have a fleet of Rolls Royces, you're not rich. You up here talking about, oh, I'm middle class. Oh, shut the fuck up. You're broke. You're poor. Never been on a private jet. Never been in a Rolls Royce. Don't own multiple properties. Can't print money out of thin air. You're poor. Piss me off when people think they motherfucking bourgeoisie because they're wearing some fucking belt that costs $2,000. They have a bag that costs $50,000. Bitch, you broke. You poor. Show me your motherfucking fleet of private jets. Show me your fleet of motherfucking Rolls Royce Phantoms 2023s. Show me your multiple apartments throughout the motherfucking world. Show me you printing money out of motherfucking thin air. That's when you motherfucking rich. Unless you can do that, you ain't rich. You poor. Just like the rest of us enslaved motherfuckers. You're poor. We're poor. This shit fucking up everything. Fucking up families. See, the way that it used to work and should work, and that our founding fathers of the United States wanted it to work, was that we had to rely on gold and silver. This is why it's in the Constitution that Congress shall coin coins out of only gold and silver. This abolishing the Federal Reserve Act and giving power back to silver and gold is the way that we can fix and rid ourselves of the cancerous Federal Reserve, the 8 families of the Federal Reserve. You got these fucking people out here, women out here, going out, pushing paper, thinking that they doing some shit. For this. For these notes that the Federal Reserve prints out of thin air. You can't print silver and gold out of thin air. You gotta dig for that shit. You gotta dig ditches. You gotta go in the ground. Let's see women do that. Let's see you dig some ditches. Get dirty. Break nails. Break sweat. Wear bandanas. Get dirt all under your nails. To get that silver. You don't want to do that, do you? Oh, that's right. You go ahead and stay at home, baby. Take care of the kids, baby. Let us men go out there and dig and mine for silver and gold, real money. Let's trade goods for silver and gold. This shit got everything all fucked up. People who print money out of thin air out there riding on motherfucking Rolls Royces and private jets for not doing a goddamn piece of work. While the people that breaking their backs are the broke people. The Illuminati. The illuminated ones. The enlightened ones. This paper is not backed by anything besides the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which gave the 8 families of the Federal Reserve the power, the monopoly, to create the currency of the United States, to steal the purchasing power from the citizen of the United States. You have to abolish the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. I know this video started off with Donald Trump. It took a turn for who really controls this country, who really controls you. We have people killing, stealing for these notes. They're spending their lives for these notes only to have the purchasing power stolen from them by the push of a button by the 8 families of the Federal Reserve, or the Illuminati, however you want to call them. We can end this cancer by abolishing the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. So that's this video. I said 20 minutes. It's now 43 minutes. I want this video to be out, so probably won't have too much editing. It's probably going to be in its rawest form. But that is what it is. I'm out.